So I'm Caleb Ediger. I'm a current Doctor of Nursing Practice student at the University of Kansas Medical Center, and I am recording this presentation for my Principles of Epidemiology course. And this presentation will be on smoking and the correlation to bladder cancer. So smoking is significant in the United States. 15 out of every 100 U.S. adults are smokers, according to the CDC 2015. So that translates to 36.5 million people in the U.S. smoke. Smoking comes in many forms: cigarettes, pipes, smokeless tobacco, and the new trend of vaping that is coming out. So bladder cancer, smoking attributes to 65% of bladder cancer in males and 20 to 30% in females. There are 350,000 cases diagnosed yearly worldwide, and then 70,000 in the U.S., according to Friedman. Risk factors for bladder cancer are gender, it happens mostly in males, age, smoking history, which first was identified in 1950 as a risk factor, and then also environmental exposures, toxins, chemicals, everything that people come into contact with in everyday life. So 3 articles were selected to review for this presentation. The first one, Tripathy et al., was published in 2002. It was a prospective cohort study, and 37,459 women from Iowa from the health study were given a lifestyle questionnaire, and they were asked about lifestyle status, exercise, and then their smoking status. They were then followed for 13 years after the questionnaire. They were ages 55 to 69. And then 15% of these were current smokers and 66% never smoked. And then out of the 37,459, there were 112 diagnosed bladder cancer cases during the time. So looking at that, strengths that were identified with these articles, they identified other lifestyle factors that put people at risk for bladder cancer, so those need to be explored a little bit more. Then limitations, there were relatively few cases. There was some missing information on some of the bladder cancer cases regarding risk factors, fluid intake, history of urinary tract infections, and then also occupational exposures or environmental exposures were not included. So. The second article that was selected was Friedman et al. 2012. It was a prospective cohort study as well. 281,391 men were surveyed, and then 186,134 women were given the NIH AARP cohort lifestyle questionnaire. It was mailed to them. There were 3.5 million of those that were mailed out, so the return rate wasn't as good as they really wanted to expect. They were followed from 1995 to 2006 in 8 states after they completed this. The questionnaire addressed tobacco, alcohol intake, physical activity, and then their demographics. So out of this, 3,896 men were diagnosed with bladder cancer, and 627 women had bladder cancer related to tobacco smoking. So looking at the strength of the study, they include the assessment of smoking use before cancer diagnosis was very good. There were a very large number of participants and incidence of bladder cancers. Presentation of both incident rates and relative risk were great. There was some limitations. It was lacking information about the age of smoking initiation, so they don't know when people started smoking, and they couldn't calculate the smoking duration or pack years based upon when people actually started smoking. That was not in the questionnaire. So the third article that was selected is Barris et al. It was a case control study. There were 1,170 newly diagnosed cases of cancer that were interviewed, bladder cancer that were interviewed. And then there were 1,413 control subjects that were selected from DMV records at random to do this. This also looked at 2 previous studies that were conducted in New Hampshire and 2 other states from 1994 to 1998, and then also from 1998 and 2001. They actually just used the New Hampshire data on this study because that's really what they had access to and what was most relevant. So smokers were identified in a couple different ways. They were identified as a regular smoker. That means they had smoked 1 cigarette per day for at least 6 months. They also could be under a regular smoker if they had quit, be classified as a former smoker, and that's if they had quit 1 year or more before their bladder cancer diagnosis. There was also occasional smokers, and these were people who had smoked more than 100 cigarettes in their lifetime. And then there are people who never smoked, and that was they smoked less than 100 cigarettes in their lifetime. So some strengths of this, there was a large sample size of the population. They did get detailed smoking history forms because they were actually able to interview the cancer patients directly. But there were also some limitations. There was lack of time to train the data from the other 2 states that were involved. So New Hampshire, like I said, was the only one that was involved. And then 65% participation rate among both case patient and control. So there wasn't, between both of those, 65% of those people had actually participated. So it was a little bit more than half. So looking at these articles, the first article, tripothy, there were, like I said, 37,459 women. The odds ratio was 3.58. And then looking at Article 2, 281,394 men and then 186,134 women. A hazard ratio was actually conducted on this one, and it was 3.89. Then Barris, there was 1,170 cancer patients and 1,413 control subjects. And the odds ratio was 5.2 for current smokers and then 2.3 for former smokers is what we looked at. So looking at Heineken's criteria, it's based on chance, bias, co-founding, strength of association, biological plausibility, consistency, temporality, and dose response. So from tripothy, the 95% confidence interval ranged from 1.86 to 6.88, and the P was less than 0.05, so that was statistically significant. There was a little bit sexual selection bias because there was only women in the study, and it was self-reporting. Age, gender, smoking status, the state they lived in, time were all controlled. Their BMI, which was measured on some of the patients, was not controlled. Their exercise was not consistent with all the patients, so that was not controlled. And then other factors for cancer were not controlled. They just looked at various other factors based on the lifestyle questionnaire. The odds ratio of 3.58 is a moderate. So it was biological plausible, it was consistent, temporality was no, and dose response yes. So Friedman's article, 95% confidence interval, 3.75, 3.43 to 4.10. P was less than 0.05, so that is statistically significant. Selection bias, the participants self-reported on a questionnaire, and also previous studies were used and reviewed for that, so they could not get all of the information, and they didn't know if there was any issues with bias on who actually reported that. Age, gender, smoking status, state residence, bladder cancer cases, and cigarette smoked were all controlled. Their gender was not controlled, it was self-reported, so they didn't use just men or women, it was all self-reporting. Hazard ratio of 3.89, it was moderate. Biological plausibility, yes. Consistency, no. Consistency, yes. Temporality, no. Dose response, yes. So with Barris, 95% confidence interval, 2.4 to 3.6. For regular smokers, 95% confidence interval, 4.0 to 6.6 for current smokers. The P used was less than 0.05, so it was statistically significant again. Selection bias, participants could be choose not to participate in this study if they wanted to, and there were quite a few that didn't. Time, state, case, smoking status, and were all controlled, and their gender was not controlled. Odds ratio was just regular smokers, 3.0. Odds ratio current smokers, strong. Biological plausibility, yes. Consistency, yes. Temporality, yes. And dose response, no. So the conclusions from looking at these 3 studies, all 3 studies did link smoking to bladder cancer, showing statistically significant data. All cases were case control or prospective cohort studies. Also, what was seen was the longer a person smokes, the higher the risk of bladder cancer. And all of them used some kind of comparison from other studies to come to their conclusions. Some future studies that should be really focused on looking at if ethnicity is really an issue to bladder cancer and smoking, or smoking in general. age that they started smoking to see if that really has a huge significant. Only one study actually addressed that. And then also looking at the type of smoking devices now with vaping, and then people using cigars, smokeless tobacco, to see if any of that has any kind of contributions to bladder cancer. So these are my references for the study, for my presentation. I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to my presentation.